Right, so it's all been really, really fascinating. This world of technology and, using this world of technology as a tool to help us get what we want. Zenia and John, perhaps you could answer the question that has been troubling me as I was listening to all of you. What do you think is the single most critical technology or tool that is going to help us this year in 2017? And what about those of us, who are not so tech savvy and we worry about artificial intelligence and robots and machines and all that mumbo jumbo that kind of takes over? So what, according to both of you, would be the single most critical technology tool that would help us this year to get where we need to get, to revolutionize things?
You have a go.
I don't have a single answer because, as I said earlier, it's really about the convergence of these technologies. Each technology on its own has some merit. We're talking about this mumbo jumbo robots and all this. Yeah, okay. So it's really not a simple answer. So because you said robotics, robotics with AI, artificial intelligence built in, and advanced sensors just takes the field so much further than just robotics on its own, for example. So I think it's very difficult. I don't know about you, John, but that's answering the first part of your question.
Well, let me try. I mean, I often talk to people in high technology businesses about a guy called Tom Midgley, who was a scientist and an engineer, both at General Motors and DuPont in the early 1930s. And he had 100 patents, and he came up with 3 really memorable technologies. One is leaded gasoline, brilliant anti-knock technology, but really damaged young people's nervous systems and learning capacity. The second one was freons, chlorofluorocarbons, which kindly blew a hole in our stratospheric ozone layer. I mean, and these things weren't on their wish list at that time. It was just something that happened. And then he very sadly contracted polio and constructed himself, in effect, a robotic bed with ropes and pulleys, and it strangled him. And I just use that sad example in a way to make the point that we come up with these brilliant technologies. And I think one of the problems that we face is, firstly, the people developing these technologies do not largely, but there are exceptions, think about things like the Sustainable Development Goals. They're just thinking about the wonder of what they're doing. And then the sustainability industry, I mentioned NGOs and so on, is very often rearward facing. We pay a lot of attention to the industries that caused problems in the past. So oil, petrochemicals, automotive, aerospace, and so on. What we're not doing is sufficiently yet plunging into that emerging future. Then to your question, what can companies do about it? Get out more. Get your leadership teams out through groups like to learning journeys and so on. And the shock effects of some of that can be actually quite profound. So that's not just for you all, it's for the people that you report to. And I think the more you can get them out and experience some of this new stuff where it's actually happening, the better.
Yeah, I'd like to offer. We don't know each other. This might offend you. I apologize. Actually, I don't apologize. It's the wrong question. Mm-hmm. The question was, what feature would you like to work with? It's the wrong question, in my view. To a business leader, the question is, what are your in-year objectives and where are you behind? The question about what technology do you need is not the same question as what benefit do you need. Okay. And if you are a global pharma company and you need to sort out your supply chain, then actually you could talk about big data. Obviously, you could talk about big data, but you could talk about other breakthrough innovations as well. And I just want to respond to your 2 other points. One of the challenges with talking about being worried about these things is that we have a responsibility to each other and our customers to read those briefs. If you're worried about AI, I would love for you to tweet after you've read that brief, whether or not you are any less worried or more worried. It's not about convincing you not to be worried, it's about being informed about being worried. And the third point, when you said mumbo jumbo, this is the challenge. If we as a business community believe it's mumbo jumbo, then we are doing what senior leaders did in 2004 when they saw Facebook and other social media networks and thought, you know what, that's for kids. That's for coupon codes. No, it's not. It's a fundamental shift in the way we communicate with each other. So my plea would be to just develop a language which does not include relatively informed ways of dismissing business value.
So taking that point forward, would you call this disruptive technologies and the effect of disruptive technologies? Do we need to worry about that? Because there is that chaos before and the chaos that follows after, before it gets dismissed.
But business model disruption is not about disruptive behavior. Business model disruption is about fundamentally challenging the assumptions that have provided you with structure for years, decades, maybe multiple decades. So the disruption, should we pick one? Do you have a favoured one, actually, a favoured example?
Yeah, talk about synthetic biology.
Okay, so let's start with the benefit. We want to reduce food waste. Is there a way to reduce food waste by using gene editing to ensure that, for example, crop installations in areas where digital agriculture is being developed, the convergence point you're making, how would you bring that together? So rather than sell the opportunity to say, let's try IoT for agriculture and gene editing for more robust crops, let's take the business challenge of supplying a new market at a lower point of price so then we can develop greater value. I'd say that's not a play on words. It is fundamentally flipping around the thinking to be more about what outcomes we want to achieve for the world.
Yeah, but it sounds a little difficult to kind of translate into everyday businesses. I mean, it's all well and good for Saibal to say that, you can think differently and innovatively, but how do we really tap that thinking, the mindset, changing it, making it look at disruptive or destructive or dismissive stuff as something that could be used as a first step to something brilliant?
Well, first of all, you have to open your mind to the possibility that some of this may not be good for us, right? So just like John was saying, in hindsight, we could really look back and say, well, this wasn't a good choice. But if you don't open your mind at all, then you're going to be nowhere. So what these exponential technologies are going to do for us is they're going to challenge everything. So come to the table ready to be challenged. And when I say everything, I mean everything. They're going to challenge us into understanding what it fundamentally means to be human. What are we cyborgs? Is anybody a cyborg in the room?
Not yet.
Yeah, well, I put my hand up. I am. Anyone has ever broken a bone and got a replacement, a rod? I've had an implant, a tooth implant. I'm a cyborg. Who's wearing contact lenses? You're an augmented being, So again, those might seem like small, innocuous examples, but 100 years ago, they'd be rather shocking, don't you think? But you've got to open your mind to this. And whether we are leading into a dystopian future or a utopian future is really up to us. And the biggest point is that we have to inform ourselves. We cannot operate in ignorance. You've got to embrace the good, the bad, all of it.
So I think the CEO of a contact lens company would be very interested in what you just said. And I'd be really surprised if they haven't planned at least one experiment with a 3D printer. But the issue is not about how to use 3D printing because it's cool. It is, how do I develop a more convenient experience for people who use contact lenses? And how do I develop them at a lower price point? And how do I take that to the market in a way that has a business model around it, which is also part of their overall transformation? So I think that's a brilliant example, because actually ophthalmic companies, it's not just that they need to see the brief on additive manufacturing. We should put together a workshop for ophthalmic companies talking about contact lenses of the future. And I bet it's already happened. Yeah. So actually, do we have a responsibility to go and find that community and connect them to us? I'd say it's more on us to do that than it is on ophthalmologists who are talking about this in conferences to come to find us.
Yeah.
Okay, Jeff?
Just very quickly to try and respond to I should have put my hand up. I had cataract operations a few years back, so I'm a cyborg. But the serious point is that your younger people understand this in a very different way to most of us. Whatever generation you are, it's absolutely true. They're natives, whether it's digital or whether it's going to be synthetic biology or whatever. And we had a company, Cemex from Mexico. They may be represented in the room, but they're a big cement company, and you wouldn't have thought they'd be very much interested in the sorts of futures that we're talking about. But the CEO took a young group of fast-track people from around the company and sent them out on the road. Said, go anywhere in the world you want to and find out what's happening in advanced technology, and then come back to and tell me. And the principle was, in a few years, we may not be primarily a cement company. We may be an urban services company and so on. Come and tell me how we do that. So that's not something you do next Tuesday. It's not possibly something you even do in the next 3 to 4 months. But unless you're starting to plan that fairly quickly, other people will be. And I think you may well be sideswiped.
And you don't even know who your competition is, right? So, again, talking to some dairy farmers in Canada last week, and they don't even know who their competition is because they're not milking cows. Their competition are young people sitting in labs and playing around with gene editing, synthetic biology, creating new kinds of materials so that taste exactly like milk. Perfect Day, that's a startup out of the US. Modern Meadow, a growing hamburger in a lab, growing a steak in a lab. That's the competition, and you don't even know it's coming.
So this is where I become a boring management consultant, because I'm thinking, okay, there's got to be a commercial model behind that. Actually, what would you expect the year one performance to be? Is it okay for us to spend $500,000 on that or $50,000 on that? Should we actually try and work in collaboration? Should we try and design a circular economy style business model to try and work with smaller startups? Let's not try and get into this traditional, let's just buy them and give them all personal wealth that makes them want to be locked into us. Let's find a more circular way to do it. You talked about audacity. I love that word. It's difficult to talk about audacious commercial models because ultimately you'll see it in Excel. But how can we translate that? I believe it is from flipping it over and thinking, what is the business benefit this year for a company who has a plan this year with a budget which is budgeted for this year, and working with them to scope that project now, so then we don't give them the reason to say, we've got our 2018 planning round coming up, it starts in September, let's meet in August, have a gentle conversation about it, we can put $50,000 aside, let's see how it goes. No, let's reject that. Let's go and be formal and professional about business cases and commercial models. I think we'll get somewhere.
So, John, if I could just get you to have the last word here. What would you then have in mind when you say, go out and speak to your bosses? Are there 1 or 2 points that you would want them to keep in mind as they go out and disrupt the normal?
I think the first thing I would disrupt in the minds of people in the global C-suite, the thousands of companies around the world and their top teams, is the notion that sustainability is about keeping the world as it is. It's not. I mean, Zenia talked about another 3-point-whatever billion people joining us later on in this century. We have a major structural problem coming at us, and we've got to respond in a very different set of ways. So if people think of this simply as, let's do more stakeholder engagement, let's be more transparent and so on, let's rattle our supply chains a little bit, that's a category error. That's a big mistake, because actually I've often said, although I've supported transparency and reporting for 30 years by companies, I actually would welcome the point at which the landscape starts to go dark, because growing numbers of technology companies in particular are in stealth. The company I was with in Israel is in stealth. And it's now starting to come out because they can suddenly see how it gets into the marketplace in the right way. So to the CEOs and people like that, just get out and talk to some of those people, because it'll give you a much more visceral sense of the reality that is now emerging.
Thank you very much. Zenia, you have any last words to add to that?
I'll just
Saibal?
add to build on the audacity piece here. You have to take risks. Everybody tells you that. I know, failure is a good word in some cultures, bad word in others, etc. But it is absolutely essential. It's the rapid iteration of risk, rapid iteration of trial and error that really, really gets you there. And I think that the C-suite globally is really waking up to all this. I mean, I don't think anybody here is in the dark. So good luck. And a lot of us are available to you as you take that bold leap forward. So reach out and connect.
Saibal?
I politely ask that you challenge yourself with a realistic answer to the question, are you going to drive a breakthrough yourself and adopt the skills required to write a business case, create a commercial model, and do that at the level where you're not asking someone to do the numbers and you're asking a project manager to convert your vision into a business case? Are you going to drive it yourself, or are you going to wait for others?
Right, a truly eye-opening session here. Thank you, John, Zenia, and Saibal.